Hello everyone, and welcome. When you hear the words Ark of the Covenant, what comes to mind? A golden chest perhaps, carried on poles, filled with ancient stone tablets. An artifact of immense religious significance. Certainly, a priceless piece of history. Absolutely. But what if I told you that sacred relic is the most profound understatement in human history? What if the Ark was never meant a piece of divine technology so potent it could level cities, part seas, and strike down the unworthy with invisible force? The Bible is filled with stories of its power, accounts that read less like religious texts and more like field reports from a supernatural war. And then, at the height of its glory, it vanishes, gone from the record without a trace. This isn't just the story of a lost artifact. This is the story of a weapon, and today we're going to explore not only what this divine weapon was capable of, but where in the world it might be waiting right now to be rediscovered. The story begins, as so many do, on a mountain shrouded in thunder and fire, Mount Sinai. The peak trembles, the sky is torn open by lightning, and the air crackles with an energy not of this world. Down below, an entire nation of freed slaves waits on the summit. Their leader, Moses, stands in the heart of the storm, conversing with a power that defies comprehension. He isn't just receiving laws, he is receiving a blueprint, a set of instructions so precise, so specific, they read like a technical manual for a device of immense complexity. God is commissioning the construction of his earthly throne, a mobile command center for his. It must be built of acacia wood, a timber known for its resilience and resistance to decay, a wood that grows in the harshest desert environments. It's a symbol of incorruptibility of life, persisting against all odds. But this humble earthly material was only the foundation. It was to be overlaid, inside and out, with the purest gold, not just for beauty but for conductivity. It was a fusion of the mundane and the divine mortal wood, sheathed in immortal light. The dimensions were exact, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 wide, 1.5 high ratios, and numbers that biblical scholars and mystics have debated for millennia, believing them to hold cosmic significance, a key to divine geometry. But this was no mere box inside. It would hold the 2 tablets of stone, inscribed by the finger of God himself. These weren't just commandments, they were the operating system, the source code for a new moral and spiritual reality. They defined the relationship between the divine and the human, the framework through which the Ark's power would be channeled and controlled. Next, a golden pot of manna, the miraculous bread from heaven that sustained, a physical remnant of a perpetual miracle, a substance that defied natural laws, a constant reminder of divine provision and power. Finally, Aaron's rod that had budded, a dead piece of wood that had miraculously burst into life, flowering with almond blossoms overnight. This was the life force battery, a symbol of resurrection, of authority, of life springing from death, of power. They created a synergistic energy field within the golden container. But the most crucial component was on the lid, the capparet, often translated as the mercy seat. This solid gold cover was the interface, and guarding it, sculpted from the very same piece of gold, were 2 cherubim. Forget the chubby infants of Renaissance paintings. These were beings of awe and terror from the highest. They faced each other, their mighty wings arching over the mercy seat, creating a sacred space between them. It was in this space between the wings of the cherubim that the Shekinah, the very tangible physical presence of God, would manifest. The air itself would shimmer, a pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. The mercy seat wasn't just a lid, it was a focal point, a capacitor for when the construction was complete and Moses consecrated it, something profound happened. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle so intensely that not even Moses could enter. A power source had been switched on, and the world would never be the same. For 40 years, this divine weapon traveled with the Israelites through the wilderness, a constant, terrifying, and awesome presence. It was their guide, their protector, and the river was at flood stage, a raging, impassable torrent. Before them lay the promised land, but it was cut off. Joshua, the new leader, gave a command that must have sounded like madness. He ordered the priests carrying the ark to walk directly into the churning water. Imagine the scene. The priests, robed in white, solemnly approach the water's edge, the golden ark gleaming on their shoulders. The roar of the river fills the air. It piles up on itself as if hitting an invisible dam downstream. The riverbed runs dry. A wide, clear path opens up through the middle of the raging river. The ark didn't just inspire a miracle, it was the miracle. It projected a field of force that held back millions of tons of water, defying gravity, defying nature itself. The entire nation of Israel walked across on dry ground. And the moment it was clear, the invisible dam broke, and the Jordan River crashed back into its course with a thunderous roar. The message was clear. The power that led them was not bound by the rules of the world they were about to enter. But this was just a demonstration. The first time the ark was truly deployed as a weapon of war was against the first great obstacle in the Promised Land, the fortress city of Jericho. A direct assault would be a suicidal bloodbath, but God's battle plan delivered to Joshua was bizarre. There would be no siege engines, no scaling ladders, no battering rams. The army was to march around the city once a day for 6 days, in total silence. In front of the army would walk 7 priests blowing 7 trumpets made of ram's horns, the shofars, and at the very head of the procession was the Ark of the Covenant. For 6 days, the people of Jericho watched this silent, unnerving ritual. The only sound was the eerie, piercing cry of the shofars, a sound that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. The golden box at the center of it all seemed to hum with an unseen energy. It wasn't a military maneuver, it was a ritual. They were charging the weapon. Each circuit of the city, each blast of the horns, was building. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times. The tension must have been unbearable. After the final circuit, Joshua gave the command. The priests blew a final, long, deafening blast on the shofars, and then the entire army of Israel, tens of thousands of men, unleashed a single massive shout. The Bible says the walls fell down flat. Modern interpretations often try to explain this as a convenient a wave of pure energy that didn't just crumble the walls, it disintegrated their molecular integrity. They collapsed inwards, creating a ramp for the Israelite army to charge straight in. This was not a random act of God. This was divine siege warfare. The ark was the targeting system, the amplifier, and the warhead, all in one. The ark's reputation as a fearsome weapon grew, but with it came a dangerous temptation, for the Israelites to see it not as a conduit of God's presence, but as a magic talisman, a guarantee of victory they could control. This arrogance led to one of the most shocking events in their history. In a battle against their arch enemies, the Philistines, the Israelite army was losing badly. In a desperate and foolish move, they decided to bring the ark from its sanctuary in Shiloh to the front lines, believing its mere presence would turn the tide. The soldiers cheered when it arrived, their morale soaring. The Philistines, hearing the commotion and learning that the ark was in the Israelite camp, were filled with terror. They knew its reputation. "The gods have come to their camp," they cried. But their terror turned to desperate courage. They fought with the ferocity of cornered animals, and the unthinkable happened. The Israelite army was routed, and the Ark of the Covenant, the throne of God himself, was captured. It was a national catastrophe, a spiritual crisis of the highest order. The high priest, Eli, upon hearing the news, fell backward from his chair, broke his neck, and his daughter-in-law, going into labor, named her son Ichabod, meaning, "The glory has departed from Israel." But the Philistines' victory was short-lived. They had not captured a mere trophy. They had captured a radioactive contaminant. They took the ark to Ashdod and placed it in the temple of their chief god, Dagon, as a symbol of their victory. The next morning, the priests of Dagon entered the temple to find their massive statue fallen on its face before the ark, as if in worship. They set it back up the following morning. They found it fallen again, but this time, its head and hands were broken off on the threshold. The ark was asserting its dominance. Then, the plague began. A horrifying outbreak of tumors afflicted the people of Ashdod. The plague of tumors immediately broke out in Gath. Desperate, they sent it to Ekron. The people of Ekron cried out in terror, "They have brought the ark of the God of Israel to us, to kill us and our people." The plague struck them as well, and a deadly confusion gripped the city for 7 months. The ark moved from city to city, leaving a trail of death and disease in its wake. It was as if it was emitting a divine ray. The Philistine leaders, utterly defeated, convened their priests and diviners. How could they rid themselves of this terrible object? The advice was to not just send it back, but to send it back with a guilt offering, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, one for each Philistine lord, to appease the wrath of the God of Israel. They placed the ark and the golden offerings on a new cart, hitched it to 2 milk cows. The natural instinct of the cows would be to immediately return to their calves. But instead, they turned and walked in a straight line without deviating directly towards the border of Israel, mooing as they went. The ark was guiding itself home. It had demonstrated that it could not be controlled, it could not be treated as a mere object, and its power was absolute. But the lesson of the ark's terrifying holiness wasn't over. They looked inside the ark. The text says God struck down 70 men for this act of sacrilege. The joy turned to terror. "Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God?" they cried. The message was being hammered home again and again. The ark's power was not safe. It was not tame. Later, during the reign of King David, the ark was being transported to its new home in Jerusalem. The journey was a massive celebration. A man named Uzzah, walking alongside, instinctively reached out his hand to steady it. The moment his flesh touched the sacred gold, he was struck dead on the spot. It was an immediate lethal judgment. David was terrified and angry. Uzzah's intention was good, but intention doesn't matter when dealing with raw divine power. It was a defense mechanism, an inviolable perimeter. Touching the ark was like grabbing a... It operated on a different level of reality, and the laws that governed it were absolute and unforgiving. If you are finding this exploration into the true power of the ark fascinating and the profound mystery it represents, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support is what allows us to dig deeper into these incredible stories from our ancient past. Now, after the terrifying incident with Uzzah, King David successfully brought the ark into Jerusalem amidst great ceremony. For the first time, it had a fixed abode, but it was David's son Solomon, a king renowned for his almost supernatural wisdom, who would build its ultimate sanctuary. Solomon's temple was one of the wonders of the ancient world, a masterpiece of architecture and artistry. It was its innermost sanctum, a perfect cube called the Dibur, or the Holy of Holies. This room was designed as a containment chamber for the Ark of the Covenant. It was a place of absolute darkness, with no windows. It was separated from the rest of the temple by a massive thick veil, woven from purple, blue, and crimson thread. The design was meant to insulate the outside world from the raw power pulsating within. On that day, he would undergo extensive purification rituals, wear special linen garments, and enter the crushing darkness with incense to cloud his vision, and the blood of a sacrifice to atone for the sins of the nation. He would sprinkle the blood on the mercy seat between the wings of the cherubim, in the very presence of God. It was the most dangerous and sacred moment in the entire Hebrew calendar. For centuries, the legends of its power on the battlefield faded into history, replaced by its role as the center of worship and atonement. And then, the biblical record goes silent. The story of Israel continues, filled with war, prophecy, and political turmoil. The kingdom divides. Kings rise and fall. But the ark is rarely mentioned again. The final deafening silence comes in the early 6th century BC. After a brutal campaign, the city falls. The magnificent Temple of Solomon is plundered and burned to the ground. The Book of Kings and the Book of Jeremiah provide detailed, itemized lists of the treasures looted by the Babylonians and carried off to Babylon. They took the golden pillars, the bronze sea, the shovels, the pans, the censers. Every sacred vessel is meticulously accounted for. Every single one, except the most. It is not mentioned as being captured. It is not mentioned as being destroyed. It is simply gone. This is the heart of the mystery. An object of such supreme importance doesn't just get misplaced. Its disappearance from the historical record at the very moment of the temple's destruction suggests it wasn't there to be taken. It had been moved. It had been hidden. But by whom and where? The most prominent and religiously significant theory comes not from the Bible itself, but from the second book of Maccabees, an ancient text considered canonical by some Christian denominations. It tells a stunning story. The prophet Jeremiah, a contemporary of the Babylonian invasion, received a divine warning. God told him that the temple was going to be destroyed and the people taken into exile. Acting on this divine oracle, Jeremiah commanded a small secret group to take the ark, along with the sacred tent of meeting and the altar of incense, and follow him. He led them out of the city, on a journey to the very mountain where Moses had looked upon the promised land before he died, Mount Nebo, in modern-day Jordan. There, the prophet found a cave. He had the sacred objects placed deep. His followers wanted to mark the spot so they could find it again, but Jeremiah forbade it. He then delivered a prophecy that echoes through the ages. The place shall be unknown until God gathers his people together again and shows his mercy. Then the Lord will disclose these things, and the glory of the Lord will appear with the cloud, as it was seen in the time of Moses, and when Solomon prayed that the place might be consecrated. It was deliberately taken offline, placed in divine storage, waiting for a future, appointed time of redemption. The search for a cave on Mount Nebo has been ongoing for centuries, but the mountain is riddled with countless caves, its terrain scoured by time. Jeremiah's secret, if this account is true, has been well kept. But there is another compelling theory, one that speaks to the wisdom of King Solomon himself. He knew that the temple, for all its glory, was a physical structure that could be destroyed by enemy armies. So, as part of the original construction, he is said to have commissioned his builders to excavate a complex series of tunnels and a secret, subterranean chamber deep in the bedrock beneath the Temple Mount. This chamber was designed for one purpose, to serve as an emergency vault for the Ark of the Covenant. According to this legend, when the Babylonian armies were closing in on Jerusalem, the priests of the temple, following ancient prearranged plans, secretly lowered the Ark into this hidden chamber, sealing it away moments before the city fell. The Babylonians plundered a temple that had already had its heart removed. This theory gained immense traction centuries later with the arrival of the Knights Templar. This mysterious order of warrior monks established their headquarters on the Temple Mount itself and for nearly a decade conducted extensive excavations. While their official purpose was to protect pilgrims, many believe their true mission was a treasure hunt for the Ark of the Covenant, based on secret knowledge they had uncovered. Whether they found anything remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries. Today, the Temple Mount is any attempt at a major archaeological excavation beneath it is impossible, as it could trigger a catastrophic conflict. So the Ark, if it is there, remains protected not by stone, but by the geopolitics of the modern world. But there is a third, and perhaps the most astonishing theory. It takes us far south, across deserts and seas, to the heart of Africa. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian churches in the world, makes a bold and unwavering claim. They have the Ark of the Covenant, and they have had it for almost 3,000 years. Their national epic, the Kebra Nagast, the Glory of Kings, tells the story of the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon. From their union, a son was born named Menelik. Solomon, overjoyed, lavished him with gifts and begged him to stay and rule after him. But Menelik was determined to return to his homeland. So Solomon decreed that the firstborn sons of all the high priests and nobles of Israel must accompany Menelik back to Ethiopia. The story takes a dramatic turn. Azariah, the son of the high priest Zadok, has a dream in which God commands. According to the Kebra Nagast, the group of young Israelites secretly built a perfect replica of the Ark. Then, with divine assistance, the angel Michael magically swapped the real Ark with the forgery. Menelik and his entourage left Jerusalem with the most sacred object on earth, while Solomon and the priests of the temple were left guarding a fake, completely unaware of the switch. The journey to Ethiopia was said to be miraculous, with Menelik brought the Ark to his capital, Aksum, where it became the cornerstone of the new Ethiopian kingdom and their Christian faith. To this day, they claim the Ark resides in a small, modest chapel next to the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum. It is guarded by a single virgin monk, known as the guardian of the Ark. This monk is chosen for life, and is the only person on earth permitted to see. No one, not even the leader of the Ethiopian church or the president of the country, is allowed inside. Over the years, a few Western journalists and scholars have been granted interviews with the Guardian, who describes the Ark from behind a curtain, speaking of its awesome power, the strange celestial music it sometimes emits, and the palpable energy that fills the air around it. Is it the real Ark? Or a century without independent verification, which the Ethiopian church will never allow, it remains a tantalizing and unprovable claim. A lost weapon hidden in a cave, buried under a holy site, or guarded in a remote African church. The mystery of where the Ark went is as profound as the mystery of what it was. The search for the Ark is more than just an archaeological quest. It is a mission fraught with prophetic significance. For many, the rediscovery of the Ark is not just about finding a lost artifact, but about triggering a key event in the biblical timeline of the end times. Rabbinic traditions and some Christian eschatological views hold that the Ark must be found and installed in a newly built third temple in Jerusalem before the Messiah can come. Its reappearance would be an earth-shattering event, a sign that a new era. The discovery would not just be a headline, it would be a seismic shock to the foundations of three world religions. It would ignite a firestorm of political and religious fervor. Nations would vie for control. The Temple Mount, already a flashpoint, would become the epicenter of a global crisis. The question is, why must it remain hidden? Perhaps the prophecies of Jeremiah are meant to be taken literally. The search, then, is futile until that appointed moment arrives. This frames the Ark not as a passive object waiting to be found, but as a dormant power source, a sleeping giant under divine lock and key. Its re-emergence is tied to a cosmic timetable we cannot see. It is a catalyst for the final act of a divine drama. Finding it wouldn't just solve a historical mystery, it would initiate a prophesied future. Its power was volatile, its holiness lethal. That was in a world of faith and ritual, a world that understood to some degree the concept of the sacred and the profane. What would happen if such an object were uncovered today, in our cynical, secular, scientific world? A world of competing ideologies, of nuclear proliferation, of nations that would stop at nothing to possess the ultimate weapon. Would we see it a tool for salvation, or a weapon for domination? The story of Uzzah is a timeless warning against human hubris. He tried to apply his own strength, his own good intentions, to something that operated on a divine level, and the consequences were immediate and final. Our modern world constantly tries to control, to categorize, to harness, and to dominate. The Ark represents a power that refuses. Its rediscovery might not lead to an age of enlightenment, but to a confrontation with a power so absolute it would shatter our modern sense of self-importance. Perhaps it is hidden not just for its own protection, but for ours. So after this journey through history, myth, and prophecy, what are we to make of the Ark of the Covenant? It is without a doubt the most mysterious and powerful object in the Bible. It represented God's tangible physical presence on earth, a direct and unfiltered connection to the divine. And that connection was both a blessing and a terrifying danger. Its power could create and it could destroy. It could sustain life and it could end it in an instant. This duality is at the heart of the divine. Power that is truly absolute must be both creative and destructive, merciful and just. But its disappearance is perhaps its most profound lesson. When the physical throne of God vanished from the world, it forced humanity to seek that connection elsewhere. Christian theology posits that with the coming of Christ and the gift of the Holy Spirit, the need for a physical location for God's presence was superseded. The human heart became the new Holy of Holies. The veil in the temple was torn. We are looking for an external box of gold and wood, a relic of immense power, because we often find it easier to believe in magical objects than to cultivate the divine presence within ourselves. We want a weapon to fight our battles for us, a tangible proof to silence our doubts. The Ark's absence forces us to look inward. The law once written on stone tablets is now meant to be written on our. The power of life over death, once symbolized by a budding rod, is now found in faith and resurrection. The Ark may yet be found. It may be resting in a dusty cave on Mount Nebo, or deep in the earth beneath Jerusalem's streets, or bathed in the prayers of a solitary monk in Ethiopia. Its rediscovery would undoubtedly change the world overnight. But whether it is found tomorrow, we can spend our lives chasing after external signs and wonders, searching for a lost weapon to solve our problems. Or we can understand the lesson of its disappearance, that the most profound connection to the divine, the true seat of mercy and power, is no longer housed in a golden box, but is waiting to be discovered within the sacred space of the human soul. The ultimate artifact is not lost. It has simply moved. Would it usher in an era of peace or the world's final devastating war? The answer to that may say more about us than it does about the Ark itself. All right, that is all for today's video. If you liked this video and our journey into one of history's greatest mysteries, please subscribe and give it a like to support us. It truly helps the channel grow. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.